In 1944, the US dollar rose from the ashes of World War II to become the world's financial king. For 8 decades, it has ruled global trade, powered American influence, and given Washington the ability to punish rivals through sanctions. But in 2025, that throne is under attack. President Trump has threatened tariffs of up to 100% on some of the world's fastest-growing economies. His message is blunt. Stop what he calls a war on the dollar, or face massive costs. These threats are not aimed at small nations. They target BRICS, a bloc that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and new members like Indonesia. Together, they represent more than half of humanity and nearly half of global output. Now, 2 of those members, India and Brazil, are being hit especially hard, with tariffs of 50% on goods worth billions each year. The response has been fierce. Instead of backing down, BRICS leaders are preparing to strike back, matching tariffs, shifting trade, and accelerating efforts to reduce their dependence on the dollar. This fight isn't just about geopolitics. It's about the balance of power in the global economy, and it could reshape everyday life in America. When the Second World War ended, the world needed stability. In 1944, at a meeting in Bretton Woods, world leaders made a decision that would shape the next century. They placed the US dollar at the center of global trade. The dollar was tied to gold, and other currencies were tied to the dollar. From that moment on, America's money became the world's money. For decades, this system gave the United States extraordinary power. Countries used dollars to buy oil, settle trade, and store reserves in their central banks. Washington gained a powerful tool: the ability to cut rivals off from the dollar system, freezing them out of global finance. This gave sanctions real bite and reinforced the dollar's status as the ultimate safe haven. But numbers tell us the grip is slipping. 2 decades ago, over 70% of global reserves were held in dollars. Today, that figure is closer to 58%, the lowest in modern history. Central banks from Asia to the Middle East have been buying more gold and shifting toward other currencies. The trend is slow, but it's clear. Meanwhile, BRICS has been moving in the opposite direction, growing in size, wealth, and influence. What began as 5 countries in 2009 now represents a much larger group. By 2024, the bloc welcomed new members like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. And in 2025, Indonesia joined, with 9 more lining up to enter. Together, they now account for about 2/3 of the world's population and nearly half of global GDP. Compare that to the G7, the traditional club of rich democracies led by the US. In 2009, the G7 economies dwarfed BRICS. By 2025, the picture has flipped. BRICS is bigger in population, catching up in output, and commanding growing sway in trade and energy. This shift matters because the dollar's dominance is tied to scale. As BRICS expands and deepens its trade links, its push to build financial alternatives carries more weight. And that's why Trump's tariff threat struck such a nerve. The bloc he's targeting is no longer small, and it has the numbers to fight back. The turning point came with President Trump's latest announcement. Standing before cameras, he threatened tariffs of up to 100% on goods coming from BRICS nations unless they abandon what he calls a war on the dollar. It wasn't a warning to small trading partners. It was aimed directly at economies that represent more than half of the world's people and close to half of its output. 2 countries felt the sting first: India and Brazil. Both are vital members of BRICS, and both ship tens of billions of dollars worth of goods to the United States every year. From steel and agricultural products in Brazil to pharmaceuticals and technology in India, these exports support millions of jobs. Suddenly, Washington's move slapped tariffs as high as 50% on those shipments. The economic fallout is massive. Factories that were running at full speed are now slowing production. Orders are being canceled, and exporters are warning of job losses if trade volumes collapse. American consumers are not spared either. Economists estimate the higher tariffs could add up to $56 billion in extra costs every single year, hitting electronics, cars, food, and other everyday items. For Trump, The tariffs are a pressure tactic designed to force countries back into the dollar system. For BRICS, they are a wake-up call, pushing the group to close ranks and look for alternatives. Instead of dividing the bloc, the tariffs are accelerating efforts to redirect trade within BRICS, price more goods in local currencies, and deepen financial cooperation. That's why this tariff shock matters. It has triggered not just a trade fight, but a wider push to challenge the dollar's dominance. And the counterattack is already underway. When Washington moved first with sweeping tariffs, BRICS leaders didn't fold. They responded with a plan of their own. One built not only on retaliation, but on reshaping how global trade is done. The immediate step was to match tariffs. Brazil announced retaliatory duties on U.S. goods, from agricultural imports to industrial equipment. India joined in, signaling that American companies would face steep barriers if Washington insisted on punishing their exports. Together, these moves sent a message. If tariffs escalate, the pain will be shared. But the real counterattack runs deeper than taxes at the border. BRICS countries are accelerating their long-term strategy to reduce dependence on the US dollar. China has already flipped the balance in its own trade. 5 years ago, more than half of cross-border deals were done in dollars. By 2025, over 50% are now settled in yuan. That shift is spreading outward. Southeast Asia's largest bank, DBS, reported yuan settlement volumes jumping more than 30% in a single year, reflecting growing use of the Chinese currency in trade with Latin America and the Middle East. Brazil offers a striking example. In less than 12 months, Ford vehicles vanished from factory lots, replaced almost entirely by Chinese BYD electric cars. These sales aren't just about cheaper prices or better batteries. They're increasingly priced and financed in local currencies or yuan, bypassing the dollar altogether. Each deal erodes the greenback's dominance one transaction at a time. India has also adjusted its position. After facing a 50% tariff on its exports, New Delhi announced it will not proceed with new U.S. weapons purchases. Instead, Indian leaders are looking to expand defense and technology ties with other BRICS members, particularly Russia and Brazil. This redirection highlights how trade punishment can quickly spill into strategic partnerships. At the same time, BRICS governments are advancing their own infrastructure to challenge the dollar system. They're testing cross-border payment platforms that bypass SWIFT, exploring digital settlement tools, and openly discussing the creation of a shared currency for international commerce. While a full launch may be years away, the symbolism matters. It signals that alternatives are no longer theoretical. They are being built step by step. This is why Trump's tariff shock has backfired. Instead of dividing BRICS, it is pushing the bloc closer together, strengthening internal trade, and accelerating the creation of financial channels outside the dollar's reach. And with every yuan-based deal, every retaliatory tariff, and every new payment link, the U.S. grip on global finance grows weaker. The tariff battle may have started overseas, but its impact is already hitting home in the United States. Every new duty placed on foreign goods doesn't disappear. It's passed down to American consumers and businesses. Economists estimate that Trump's 10% blanket tariff on BRICS imports, combined with the 50% levies on India and Brazil, could add up to $56 billion in extra costs every single year. That means higher prices at the checkout line, from electronics and cars to food and household essentials. But the costs go far beyond inflation. American exporters now face retaliation in some of the fastest-growing markets in the world. BRICS countries buy billions of dollars in U.S. aircraft, agricultural products, and advanced technology. If these buyers pull back or redirect their orders, companies like Boeing, Caterpillar, or Midwestern soybean farmers could see painful losses. Lower sales abroad mean fewer jobs at home. There's also a strategic angle that makes this fight riskier. BRICS members control resources that America relies on, from rare earth metals critical for defense and electronics, to oil, natural gas, and staple crops. If these flows are restricted or repriced in non-dollar terms, U.S. manufacturers could face shortages and higher input costs. The effects would ripple into energy, defense, and high-tech industries alike. The longer-term challenge is financial. Global demand for the dollar underpins America's ability to borrow cheaply. For decades, foreign central banks and investors have bought U.S. Treasury bonds, keeping interest rates low and financing Washington's deficits. But that demand is shrinking. Foreign holdings now account for roughly 30% of outstanding U.S. debt, down from nearly half a decade ago. If BRICS accelerates its move toward local currencies or a shared unit of trade, even fewer dollars will be recycled back into treasuries. The result? Higher yields, more expensive government borrowing, and steeper costs for mortgages, credit cards, and business loans across the U.S. economy. And then there's sanctions. One of America's most powerful geopolitical weapons works only if countries depend on the dollar. As BRICS develops parallel systems, Washington's ability to enforce its will weakens. Each yuan-based oil sale or ruble-denominated trade reduces the leverage of U.S. financial power. This is why the tariff war is more than a trade fight. It's a test of whether America can maintain the pillars of its economic dominance, cheap borrowing, global influence, and consumer stability, in a world that is slowly moving away from the dollar. Financial markets don't wait for trade wars to fully play out. They react instantly. In the first weeks after Trump's tariff announcement, bond markets turned volatile. Investors sold U.S. Treasuries, pushing yields higher as uncertainty over trade and deficits made American debt look riskier. For households and businesses, that shift translates into higher borrowing costs, from mortgages to corporate loans. At the same time, money has been flowing into safe haven assets. Gold surged above $2,400 an ounce, close to record highs, as investors looked for protection against inflation and dollar weakness. Bitcoin, often treated as digital gold, also spiked, drawing billions in new inflows. These moves signal not only fear, but also a search for alternatives outside traditional dollar assets. Stock markets have been swinging sharply. Shares of exporters and global manufacturers have been under pressure, while commodity producers and energy companies tied to BRICS demand have held up better. Capital is shifting out of industries that depend on U.S. BRICS trade and into assets seen as resilient in a multipolar world. Meanwhile, other emerging economies are watching carefully. Countries in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America are recalculating their strategies. Some may lean toward the United States, hoping to preserve access to dollar markets. Others see opportunity in aligning more closely with BRICS, where trade in local currencies is expanding quickly. This moment shows that the trade war is not just a clash between Washington and BRICS. It's reshaping global capital flows, forcing investors to rethink where to place their money and which assets can withstand a world where the dollar no longer has automatic dominance. This battle over tariffs is only the surface. What's really at stake is the foundation of the global economy, the role of the dollar. For decades, its dominance gave the United States cheaper borrowing, stronger purchasing power, and unmatched political leverage. But if BRICS keeps redirecting trade and building alternatives, that dominance could erode faster than many expect. The costs won't be abstract. They show up in higher interest rates, more expensive loans, and weaker sanctions power. They could even reshape America's influence abroad and the everyday cost of living at home. So the real question is simple. How long can the United States hold on to its financial throne while the rest of the world builds a different system? If you want to follow this shift as it unfolds, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you think the dollar goes from here.